Hello, everyone.
BookTube, and welcome to the month of June.
It is now June.
It is now June. We moved into this house in January, the end of
insane.
January. It's been pretty crazy.
It's been a long quarantine.
Yes, it has, definitely.
Yeah.
So today we're going to bring you our May 2020 wrap up.
We both read a crazy amount this last month. But for me personally, most of mine was at the beginning of the month. So looking back at this stuff, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, definitely. I had the Light v Dark Readathon at the beginning of May, so I had just a huge chunk of stuff that it's like, didn't I already talk about that?
Yeah, I've already talked about so many of these things.
Yeah, so we're going to try and just sort of fly through this.
Yeah.
We'll spend a little more time on the books we haven't talked about.
So I read 17 things.
I read 19 things.
I'm just gonna mush them into categories of things I've already talked about. So 4 of these books I read for our romance challenge. That was Darkness Rises, Night Unbound, Phantom Embrace, and Shadows Strike. And I already talked about all of those in our videos.
Right, and so on that same theme, I read Armed and Dangerous and Stars and Stripes by Abigail Rue, which was part of that same challenge. We'll link those videos below.
Oh,
where we talk about
absolutely.
those. Well, I did the Light v Dark Readathon. I did a vlog style video on that. So Armed and Dangerous for that one as well. I also read Lucky Suit by Lauren Blakely. I read The Prey by Jenny Foster. I read The Vampire's Mail Order Bride by Kristen Painter. White Knight by Megan March. Bite the Big One by Sharon Cara. And Black Moon by J.D. Tyler.
And so we'll link that video as well. And then 2 of these I've already done individual reviews on, so I'm not gonna talk about them here. But that is Blood Countess by Lana Popovic and Wilder Girls by Rory Power. And we'll link those videos. I read about 7 kids books this month. And I talk about all of the kids' books more in depth in my homeschool video series that I'm doing. So the only things that stand out are the series of unfortunate events, I guess I would talk about, because I sometimes use them in read-alongs and stuff. But we're slowly making our way through that series, and we're on book 11, and I'm loving the series.
Yeah, you guys are really getting into this.
Yeah. So yes.
Almost done with them too.
Yeah, there's only 13 of them.
Yeah, nice.
So.
We apologize too if there's some ramble noises. We've
Our
got
cats
two
are playing.
cats playing here next to us. Asian Readathon, yes.
Yeah.
I read 4 things for Asian Readathon.
Nice. I read 2 things for Asian Readathon.
So I can talk about 2 of them together.
Awesome.
So I read volumes 1 and 2 of Overlord. This is by Kyugane Maruyama. And these are light novels, so they look like mangas, but they're actual word books. And
Yep.
this is an isekai drama, I suppose. And that's where the protagonist is born into or transported to a new world. It's a very common trope in Japanese manga and anime. And I have watched the anime for these, but this is the actual source material, so I was excited to get into those. I know the story so far in them, but it was nice to have a little bit more detail in the thought processes, things like that, of the main character and some of the other supporting characters as well. So very fun to get into those, but I only have the first 2.
How many are there in the series?
There's 14 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll continue on with the series?
Yeah, definitely, but
Slowly.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but our local libraries do not have don't have any really manga or graphic novels or comics or anything like that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about for Asian Readathon is Kim Jae-young, born 1982, by Cho Namju. And this was one that I won off of Goodreads. It was an advanced copy, I think, when I got it. This was amazing. So the premise of this is a young mother suddenly starts being possessed, or like speaking with the voice and memories and mentality of other women. And I thought from that synopsis that it would be much more about that premise, but really that's just the opening. And then the majority of the novel really focuses on our main character growing up in the 80s and 90s. So in the 80s and 90s in Korea, and the cultural sexism that's just so pervasive in every aspect. She had to deal with this, in the school system growing up, and then in the work environment as a young adult going into adulthood, and how constantly feeling like she was being forced into a role that society wanted her to play, because it was much more difficult for her to be a working woman. Society was really pushing her into the home. They really did not want her, in the work environment. And I really enjoyed this one. This was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to be sending this to my friend to read it. Highly recommend.
The next thing I read for Asian Readathon was Attack on Titan Volume 2. This is by Hajime Isayama. This is, everyone knows what Attack on Titan is, I feel like, or you should know if you don't, because this is such a great story. This is about a walled society where humans are trapped inside because these giants known as the Titans are outside the wall, and the main character, his family is destroyed when the wall is breached in the beginning of the story when he's a child. So the story mostly takes place when he and his adopted sister and their best friend join the military, so to speak, and they join the branch that actually goes beyond the walls to try and figure out the secret to the Titans. And I've read up to like volume 22 or something like that, but just reading it again because it's awesome.
I think our oldest was trying to bond with you over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one had a big flashback scene in it. So she flew through the first one, but then I think the flashback just, didn't
hold her attention.
Exactly, yeah.
The next book I read for Asian Readathon is Severance by Ling Ma. And I've been wanting to get my hands on this book for months now. I was told that it was a zombie book, but with a twist. It was a big story about, aren't we all kind of zombies? And we just, just society is set up for mindless consumerism and repetition, and that's what I thought the book was going to be going into it, but I was still super excited. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised. It had a bit of that in it, but actually the main heart of this story is a pandemic. All of society collapsing, and then a woman trying to survive in this new world where most people on the planet have died. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It gave me a strong feeling of Station 11 in that whole, like, you're following the actual events of, like, society collapsing. You're seeing through the eyes of someone who's watching a big city fall apart and become abandoned. But I actually didn't like Station 11 very much, and whereas I really enjoyed Severance. And this was Cindy's recommendation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. And then the last thing I read for Asian Readathon was The Late Homecomer, a Hmong family memoir by Ko Kaliyan. This was a very heavy story. It's the memoirs of the author's grandmother, who the Hmong are an ethnic minority that originally was in China, but then the, whatever Chinese government of the time chased them out into Laos, and then they were in Laos. They lived in the mountains in Laos for like 200 years. But then the Vietnam War happened, and then there was this parallel war that occurred in Laos as well, that the Hmong people assisted the Americans, the United States soldiers with, or CIA agents. And then when it was over and the soldiers and CIA agents left, the Laos army then chased them out of Laos. And so this is the story of how they went from being these tribal people in these mountains and making, literally running from bombs across the border into Thailand, and then living in refugee camps in Thailand for years until they were allowed to emigrate to Minnesota. And the hardships of life then, as not knowing very much English, not knowing how to write English, and being sort of a minority in school, but so many of them came to the area that some special schools were eventually built for integration of these children, all these children that were there, and so the Hmong community is actually still very strong in the St. Paul area, I guess, in Minnesota. So that
that
very
sounded fascinating when you were telling me.
Yeah,
about
it was just a piece of history and a piece of a people that had never heard about before. I had been reading a series, the Alpha Pack series, from Audible Escapes by J.D. Tyler. This is a group of mostly shifter wolves that are secret agents that go and hunt down paranormal trouble around the world. But then they also each get to find love along their way.
Of course.
So I read Black Moon, Hunter's Heart, Cole's Redemption, and Wolf's Fall. And these were all just, different members of the Alpha Pack. I'd put these on my romance scale of I had fun, but let's just be friends. Because they're fun enough in the read through, and I'm enough invested into the group in general, and just I guess there hasn't really been much of an overall story. I thought there was going to be like a big bad that was going to carry through, but then they got him in book 3, and I guess they're still kind of dealing with the repercussions. But it's a little over the top on the romantic scenes. You can tell that the author pads the chapter, if you will, with sex scenes, and they're not they're all kind of the same. So I find myself, like, when one comes up, it's just like, can we just fade to black on this one and just keep going with the story, maybe? Or are we? No, we're gonna go through this again. Okay, so that's my biggest drawback with that. Not that I hate those parts of the books, but it becomes excessive at a point and repetitive,
Okay, so the last 2 things that I read for Springathon. The first thing was a short story called The Tree by H.P. Lovecraft. And this was a very short story, and I read it so long ago. And it was a story about 2 sculptors, and they both get hired to do this project, and then one dies, and the other one plants a tree to remember them, and then the tree is kind of creepy, and so it's left to be, you question, you're like, was it natural causes, or did the guy murder his friend or whatever, or friend or lover? It's very ambiguous. I'm not usually a fan of short stories. I need more time to get invested in the world. So I really only read this because the title had tree, and I needed that for the Springathon. So. And then the last thing I read is Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year of Food Life by Barbara Kingsolver. And this was such an accomplishment for me because I have picked this book up so many times. There's something about the cover, the title, it just like draws me in and I want to read it. I really like first year farm stories. I find it really wholesome and enjoyable listening to people bumble along in their gardening adventures or whatever. But this one was crazy long. This was like a 14-hour audiobook about farming. It was excessive. I did not enjoy this one. I'm so happy I finished it.
Yeah.
But because this way I never have to pick it up again.
There you go.
But this one felt so privileged and preachy. This is the whole main story, like idea behind this story is this family decides to only eat food grown within a 20-mile radius or a 100-mile radius, some crazy number of miles around their home. It's very local. And so that's what they do for a year. But they have some things they cheat on. They've been working on this farm for years prepping for this. You know, it feels like they cheated at it. Like so they're taking the high road and they're like, people who eat bananas when they live in Wisconsin are just terrible people. I was like, okay, judgy, seriously. They're like, we own a 30-acre ranch, but really our garden is less than an acre, so really anyone could do this. It's like, no, what are you talking about?
Yeah, as someone that lives in an apartment in New York.
Exactly, exactly. And they just feel so preachy, like people who eat food that, you know, traveled more than this amount or whatever, and like talking about how you should at least go down to the farmer's market and buy all of your food organically from farmers markets because you want to be a decent human being, right? It just smacks of privilege. I did not enjoy it.
Yeah, difficult to
Yeah,
sit through that.
absolutely. That it was just a giant lecture on how we're all terrible people and we're killing the planet. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you finished that one.
Me too.
Yeah,
Woo!
we can be done with it.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing I read Getting Played, and this is by Emma Chase. This is part of her Getting Some series. It's actually number 2. I didn't read number 1 because this one had a trope that I wanted to do some research on, and it's a one-night stand trope. I don't feel like I got that much from it because I wanted to research the chemistry that an author builds, you know, for a decision like that.
Yeah.
And it was more telling than showing. So it's such a tough criticism because that I feel like I'm totally fine with some things just being told in a book. Like you don't need to actually go and, you know, show me the history of someone, you know, if they have like a troubled childhood or whatever. Some things can just be told to move the plot along, but some things, you know, I feel like you need to actually show them through words or through the experiences and interactions of the characters. And that was a big criticism of this one, mostly, is that that was very obvious. There would be a moment in there and be like, well, that would be better if like I actually lived through some of those moments instead of just, oh, they got to know each other so well over these few hours or whatever. And so that one's gonna go on my ghosted pile because I know that's gonna fade into the ether very quickly.
Do you think you would have picked up on that as much if you hadn't have gone into it looking for research?
Maybe not, but I think I would have picked up on that overall theme that I was talking about of it just telling you. I definitely would have seen that going through, but my issue with the trope itself at the beginning, I might not have noticed. Yeah,
Sure.
good point. All right, and the last thing I read, or things I read, is I began the Arjano series by Lindsay Sands. I was recommended this by Tasha at Book Diva because she was watching our romance challenge. And these are vampire romances, and they are just spot on. They are so good. These are going onto right to the top to All About It. And all of them so far. I'm working on book 4 right now. Book 1 starts out great because it flips the gender dynamic. It's a female vampire and a normal mortal man.
Nice.
And so that whole power dynamic change was really cool. The family of vampires is just hilarious. The mother, the matriarch of the vampire family is just awesome. She's just wonderful. She's trying to play matchmaker for all her children, but
gotcha.
these are purely like almost purely character drama. Like the vampirism part is just an issue in the relationship that needs to be worked past. There's a bit of villainry in them here and there, but it's very low stakes, if you'll excuse the pun.
I'm glad you're reading these. I'm glad that I don't have to read these. I mean, they sound so up your alley, but so not up my alley.
I don't know why you wouldn't like
Oh
some.
my gosh. He has been cracking up listening to these. It's just...
Yeah, there's just great moments. Book 3, oh my goodness, there was a whole moment of the guy needing to find a condom and a conversation with the hotel front desk, and then mishaps with someone else who they're sharing the suite with, answering the door naked to get it. Oh my goodness, I was losing my shit. It was just wonderful.
Oh my god.
So a quick bite is number 1, Love Bites is number 2, Single White Vampire is number 3, and then right now I'm reading Tall, Dark, and Hungry, I think is book 4. So very much appreciate these books, appreciate the suggestion by Tasha at Book Diva, who we'll link below.
Yeah.
Yes, they are wonderful books. You should read.
I'm not gonna read them. I'm just laying that out there. That's not gonna happen.
That's all right.
I'm glad you're enjoying them.
Thank you. I am enjoying them. All right, so that is our wrap up for May 2020.
Jesus, that was the longest month I've experienced in a long time. Yeah.
And we thought April was long.
I know. It's just getting longer and longer.
All right, we tried to do this quick, but we realized it came in at almost half an hour. Thank you for sticking with us. Subscribe to our channel. Watch more of our videos if you like our videos. And we'll see you next time.